I just try to make decisions in the best interest of the team. Any decision that we make here is always made in the best interest of the team. And at that point in time, I just felt like that was the best decision at that point in time for the team. And we don't make decisions on, how much a guy gets paid. We make decisions on what's the best way to win a game. I thought both guys, Brock and Tom, handled it like the professionals that they are. Very professional, the way they handled it. And we'll see what happens next week.
Stephen A., let's go there, because that's what we do here on First Take.
Yep.
Is Osweiler done in Houston?
I believe he is. And let me explain why. He just got there. It's just one season. It's a $72 million contract. It's $37 million guaranteed. I understand, that. And I'll tell you a real quick story, y'all. When I had, quite frankly, on ESPN 2 years ago, I had a guest on my show with me for an hour. His name was our president-elect, Donald Trump. And he threw out this story. He said, when you go to a bank and you borrow $3 million and you can't pay it back, you got a problem. But when you go to a bank and you borrow $300 million and you can't pay it back, we got a problem. He said the moral of the story is the more you convince somebody to invest in you, the more they must ensure your success. I never forgot that. And I think about that when I think about Brock Osweiler, because I'm thinking about the fact that you've invested all of this money in him. So the belief is, okay, we got to support him. Here's the problem. Your fan base doesn't. And when you are a quarterback, it's one thing when you get drafted and you get booed because people don't know no damn better, okay? And then you get to go up in there and perform. That's one thing. People are being presumptuous. But when you go out there and you actually do perform and they see your performance and they're booing you, ooh, that's bad. Because you have no credibility, no resume, no cachet to fall back on. So from that point forward, it's an uphill climb. And I don't believe Brock Osweiler has the makeup to overcome that in Houston, which is why I take the position that I take. I think he's done in Houston.
He's done because he's not good. He never was good.
I'm just saying.
Those Pac-12 quarterbacks, remember that little era where it was like Andrew Luck, and then there was Matt Barkley, and there was Osweiler, and there was Foles. Congratulations to them, because not Barkley, but Foles and Osweiler actually had a little run in the NFL. That's not easy. But
Barkley kind of is.
Barkley's doing a good job in Chicago.
Yeah.
The point is they stuck more or less in the NFL, and some of them started, and Nick Foles had a good year under a certain system and everything. So that's not nothing. That's something. That's better than most. But they're just not that good. Andrew Luck is a stud, and the rest of them just not that good. And Osweiler is tall. That's true. He was tall in college. That we can all see that. He just has never been that good. It was a mistake to give him the contract. And Tom Savage, by the way, Bill O'Brien is, to me, the hero of the story. Because in a league where you see head coaches consistently make cowardly decisions based on the fear of being second-guessed and the way the orthodoxy says they should do things, it's by the book, not going for it on fourth down, etc. This was a gutsy call for him to say, you sit down with all that money they owe him, and bring in a guy off the bench who leads a comeback win. To me, that's the big story. But he's
know the coaching tree comes from Bill Belichick.
That's right. But in terms of the Osweiler question, he's done because he's not that good.
Okay, let's really break this whole thing down. And I think that he's not done. Now, does he have the mental makeup? No, I don't believe he does, because he doesn't understand about having success. Now, when you understand about having success, you understand how to prepare for success. For a guy who struggled in Denver, went over to Houston, struggled from the beginning of the season, didn't even find his number one wide receiver since the time he's been in there. And all of a sudden, Savage comes in, and they target Hopkins so many times with Savage in there. It says a lot about this young man and his mental makeup. But let's go back to Bill O'Brien. Besides Tom Brady, what quarterbacks has he ever groomed to get ready and be an elite type of quarterback?
Hasn't happened.
There you go. That's something no one talks about. This offense, how many other quarterbacks have been very successful in this offense? Take Tom Brady out.
Tom Savage.
What, in a half? And remember, he was a
He's
draft
got a great
pick.
last name.
He was a draft pick by Bill O'Brien.
Right.
Now, why is it
fourth rounder?
Well, right, but I'm saying from Pittsburgh, a lot of people talked about his upside. Yeah. But why hasn't he played leading up until this point? Because he's not ready. So why are you now all of a sudden going to throw him in there when you, at this particular point, still have a chance of making the playoffs to throw a young man in there that you know is not ready to play
Are you saying
a
it's
full
a
game?
prerequisite to be a coach in the NFL or a successful coach? Are you saying it's the most important thing, or it's just something that you have to have as a prerequisite to develop a quarterback? In other words, if you can't do that, you're DQ'd?
If you're an offensive-minded coach, and you started being a quarterback coach, then an offensive coordinator, you should have on your resume that you've groomed a quarterback, and we can look back and say, well, you know what? That's a guy that was coached by Bill O'Brien. We can say the same thing about Josh McDaniels. Has Josh McDaniels been responsible for Tom Brady's success? And what other quarterback has been successful in his offense? Kyle Orton, Tim Tebow? No. See, this is the
So
things
you're
that
not sold on Bill
I'm
O'Brien.
not sold on Bill O'Brien and this offense either. This is not an offense that's best suited for the talent that you have. Now, we talked about Pac-12 quarterbacks that haven't been successful. So what type of quarterback is Brock Osweiler? He's not a quarterback. But he's Ryan Mallett. He's Ryan Mallett to me.
But here's the problem.
Oof.
This is what they say about Brock Osweiler now. Season-long tendencies of being indecisive, holding the football too long, frequently overthrowing receivers, and forcing ill-advised passes. This is their critique of Brock Osweiler.
Yeah.
Look at what I just said. Those 4 things that I just said. That don't sound like no damn quarterback to me.
Well, it don't sound like a quarterback
passes, holding on the football too long.
Well, of course they don't say that because at this particular point, we've seen that.
All right, then.
So they're trying to cover themselves. So what are we going to hear about Tom Savage if he decides to start from 5 or 6 or 7 games? No experience, strong arm,
Donovan McNabb.
inaccurate.
Donovan McNabb,
Yeah.
give it to me straight. Are they wrong when they say Brock Osweiler looks indecisive? He's holding on to the football too long?
No.
He's overthrowing passes? That don't sound like a damn quarterback is what
Well,
I'm
we
trying
can
to say.
also say that about Brian Hoyer. We can also say
I
that
didn't
about
think he
Ryan
was my
Mallett.
brother.
We can say that everybody
I
that's
didn't
been
think
in that
quarterbacks were
offense.
quarterbacks either.
But these are guys that have been in that offense.
Are you saying that in another offense, Osweiler's a good NFL quarterback?
If the offensive coach catered the offense around his ability, you just paid him that
What
money.
is his ability?
His ability has a strong arm, get the ball downfield. Nothing to do with
That
intermediate.
sounds like
stuff.
Jamarcus Russell. He had a strong arm with the ability to get
Were
the
they
football down the
both?
field.
Were they both high draft picks?
Excuse me, and he was, listen.
That means the scouting department's not that good.
Mr. Jabba the Hutt himself, who should have been arrested for
Why you gotta
stealing
talk about
money.
his size? Why you gotta talk about his size?
Look, he was eating burgers. That's why. Instead of being in
We
the
gotta
film
go to
room and
break.
practicing. That's
I
why.
have one question, yes or no, because we have to go to break. You talked about his mental makeup, that he
Yeah.
doesn't have the right mental makeup. Can that be coached, or is that innate as a quarterback
That's
to be
something
successful?
you're born with. That's just something you're born with. But I think he starts next week.
All right. Donovan, so good to see you. And now I
Always
don't have to
good to
say until next week. We're going to see you on Friday.
See you on Friday.
Every Monday and
Saturday
Friday.
on national television and
Bookending.
defended Brock Osweiler.
He's gonna start next week.
All right.
Could Andy Reid do something with Brock Osweiler?
Yes, he could. Did it with Nick Foles.
Coming up, next to the Patriots yesterday, the Broncos have now lost 3 of their last 4 games and are 9th in the AFC standings, 3rd in the AFC West. So the defending champs are in serious danger of missing the playoffs. Max Kellerman, what has happened to these Broncos?
All right, what has happened? Bad luck, basically. I mean, but let's be specific about how it's bad luck. Look, they've been to 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls. So the franchise remains in excellent shape. But sometimes in order to preserve the excellence of the franchise, you have to make decisions that are not in your best short-term or immediate interest. They let go of stuff. Malik Jackson's gone and Trevathan, and so their defense got a little thinner and a little bit worse, just a little bit worse from like kind of an all-time dominant position they were in last year. They got banged up in the secondary. They bring back C.J. Anderson. He gets hurt. So all these little things contribute to a team. Oh, and by the way, they were so bad at the quarterback position last year that Peyton Manning played in the playoffs, as bad as he was. And the reason he played is because that's how bad Osweiler was. And yet still they felt Osweiler was their best option, a guy who just got benched for the Texans to come back in the game, and offered him like $16 million a year. He got more elsewhere. So their number 1 option, who was terrible, Peyton Manning last year's gone. Their number 2 option, they couldn't even retain. So they go with their number 3 option, and Elway took a calculated risk here. Maybe we're good enough to get back to the playoffs anyway while we preserve our cap going forward because we have the nucleus of a dynastic team if we get this right. And all that said, they're going to just miss the playoffs this year. So it's like, what happened to them? The NFL happened to them. This is how it goes.
They're not the same type of football team that we've seen. They were defensive heavy last year, and they've had a lot of injuries on the D-line. Wolf has been hurt and banged out in and out every now and then. You look at their secondary, you mentioned it. They're not the same fly zone secondary, but the offensive line is not good. Let's not. We've glossed over it because we talked about Peyton and the run game. The reason the run game is not the same because, First of all, they have running backs by committee.
It was even inconsistent last year with Peyton, though. It wasn't until down the stretch they got
I'm glad you brought that up because we can talk about Gary Kubiak and his offense. His offense is pretty much what made Mike Shanahan very successful in Denver. Being able to run the football with TD and Clint Portis and all these other guys that have been there. But the offensive line has to do their job, and they're not the same. They're not able to pick up blitzes. They're not able to open up holes for running backs that have come off the street because 7 guys have run the football for the Denver Broncos. Now you're asking Trevor Siemian, a guy who's never started, a guy who, came from Northwestern. All you heard about him was how smart he was and him just has strong arm. But the thing about it is they haven't fallen that far from what we've seen. Yeah, they're not going to make the playoffs. Now, what does this mean now going forward? Is Trevor Siemian going to be your guy? Free agency, are you going to go out and get defensive linemen, offensive linemen? You need a splash player. We've seen Demaryius Thomas. We've seen Emmanuel Sanders. Are you going to go get that tight end like you had with Julius, with their tight ends that they've had? Jacob Tamme, all these guys that have been very successful with Peyton Manning. But you need somebody to come with maybe Paxton Lynch. Eventually, we need to see what Paxton Lynch can do, and will he be your guy?
I believe in John Elway. I think he obviously is a 2-time Super Bowl champion as a quarterback. He's a Super Bowl champion as an executive. He deserves a lot of credit. But we can't completely absolve him from blame here. Because here's the reality. That offensive line that is a question mark, that's got something to do with him. The losses on defense with Trevathan and Malik Jackson and those boys, that's got something to do with him. Your inability to defend against the run, your inability to struggle, or your struggles against tight ends, that's got something to do with him. And dare I say, you did push Peyton Manning out the door. Now, we understand Peyton Manning was done.
Yeah, he's done.
9 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, QBR 44. He looked absolutely awful. But we also have to take into consideration, and you would know this, Donovan, when you talk about a quarterback, you're talking about cerebrally as well. You're talking about intellectuals. I'm sure you can appreciate that, Max. It's not just about your performance.
I can appreciate it too. Yeah, thanks.
I call him Spot Kellerman. That's why, because his logic defies all. That's what I'm trying to say.
I thought it had something to do with my ears.
That's what I'm saying. That's the whole deal.
Ivy Leaguer at the end.
But my point is this. When you look at Peyton Manning, let's take this into consideration. He controlled both lines of scrimmage. You know what that's about. When you go up to the line of scrimmage, you can dictate what a defense does. You can dictate what an offense does because you outthink everybody else and you know how to hurt people even when you have an inability physically to do the kind of things you were once capable of doing. And then you go from that to Trevor Siemian. That's a problem.
He's supposed to be smart too.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying that he's not. I'm just saying inexperienced. But before that, you pushed him, you nudged him out because you thought you would retain Brock Osweiler. And maybe, just maybe, that was where you miscalculated because it's not just an offer you made him. You thought that would be enough to keep him. And you might have miscalculated. And in that regard, we got to hold that way.
They did miscalculate.
That's what I'm saying.
Let me add to that also. You got to remember, too, the offense that they were running wasn't Gary Kubiak's offense. It was Peyton Manning's offense.
Yeah. So they tried it early in the season, and he wasn't down with that.
And that's my point. So you're talking about this is Peyton Manning's offense. Although Peyton Manning is no longer there, now you're going to the Gary Kubiak offense.
But he just wants to run the football.
Yeah, well, he wants to run. In order for you to run the football,
you got to have a running back.
Yeah, you got to have a running back.
CJ's gone.
And CJ was hurt, and everybody else that they decided to bring in now is your guy. But if you're not blocking up front in that advanced blocking scheme, you're not going to open up holes for guys to be very successful. But in doing that, if you're running the football, it's more about the attempts in that offense. So now the bootleg is very big for any quarterback. We haven't seen Trevor Siemian get outside the pocket. He stays inside the pocket and throwing it to Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. And it hasn't been consistent enough for them to be on the level with the Kansas City Chiefs or more with the Oakland Raiders and how successful they are in the passing game. Now, defensively, we just can't gloss over the fact that people are going after Harris and also Talib. And people are going down the middle of the football field and challenging T.J. Ward to guard someone at the tight end or in the slot position. Their linebackers aren't the same. Trevathan's gone. He was their vocal leader, and he's no longer there. He's in Chicago. So it's not just so much of the offense in Gary Kubiak, but I'm going to put it all on him to me because your offense, you have to understand the talent that you have, and you have to cater it to the talent that you have, and not just say this is my offense has been successful. No, you have to cater to the Trevor Siemians. You have to cater to whatever running back is back there. If they can catch the ball, make them catch the ball and run screens. If they can run the ball, then pound it up the middle.
All your guys' criticisms are legitimate. I'm not questioning the legitimacy of the criticism. I'm just saying there is one Patriots. There's one Bill Belichick. You want to say Patriots light? That's Seattle with Pete Carroll. You know, Belichick and Brady, Carroll and Wilson. Every other team in the league either has to make the calculation that, all right, this season we're not going to put all our chips in the middle of the table. Like, we may not win the Super Bowl this season. We're going to try to compete because we want to preserve our cap space and all these things going forward. Or they do push it all to the middle of the table and they go, all right, this is our window. Let's go now, because once that closes, we're going to have to rebuild. Only the Patriots and the Seahawks are franchises where year in and year out they are going to be in the playoffs. And you know what? No matter how they've reshuffled things, they have a shot to win the Super Bowl. So by that standard, that's not the Broncos yet. And probably because they've never found their young franchise QB.
That's the main
probably
thing.
been the difference.
In order for you to win in this league, you got to have a coach and a quarterback combination that has experience and understand what it takes to win.
We're not saying the obvious, though.
Right.
That is that Gary Kubiak, Super Bowl champion Gary Kubiak, may have,
Back
dare
up,
I say...
back up to John Elway.
No. Dare I say, may have gotten entirely too much credit for that title. When we think about that defense, it is what it is because of the personnel. That's Elway. When we think about the offense, it wasn't his. It was Peyton Manning's offense. So now, instead of looking at Gary Kubiak, the Super Bowl champion, maybe we need to refresh our memory of what we thought about him before he arrived in Denver. That means he was a coach of the Houston Texans when he had the Houston Texans when he had Matt Shaw. But don't
Another
get me
good
started with
segue
him.
for me, Stephen A.
There you go.
Thank you. I appreciate
All
that.
right.